Hi, I'm Jolly, host of The Jolly Abraham Show. Recently, I did a video with my dear friend, Amy Varghese, on the subject of anxiety and depression. And boy, did that video strike a nerve with so many people. Emotions were unlocked. Awareness was brought to the forefront. So many people called and texted and said, I had no idea that this is what happens. So that made me think, this is a topic that needs to be talked about. Well, mental health in general needs to be discussed more and more, especially since the pandemic. I think with the pandemic, so many people were sitting on emotions and feelings that they previously never dealt with. But with the pandemic, it brought it out and they don't know how to cope properly with it. So I decided that we need to go down the journey of mental health and talk about all subjects that we can to bring it into the spotlight, and awareness needs to be made. And so I decided to partner up with Eunice Simon of Simon Wellness in Oklahoma. She has been a nurse practitioner for over 8 years. And she is also a certified holistic nutritionist. Not only that, she is a certified mental health integrative medical provider. Now, I love Eunice, and I chose Eunice to be our expert because she takes an integrative approach to medicine, a holistic approach to medicine. What do I mean by that? She believes the body is tripartite. Body, soul, and spirit, that we are a triune being. And because of that, she says that she strives to take care and enrich people physically, mentally, and spiritually. And she wants to deal with the root causes of people's diseases and not just necessarily give them or treat them with medication. Hi, Eunice. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Jolie, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. It's so good to have you here. I'm so excited about this mental health series that we are starting. I think it's absolutely necessary in our community. And, today I want to start our series talking about childhood trauma. Mm-hmm. Now, I know, me personally, I never really heard the words childhood trauma until about, I want to say maybe about a few years ago. Mm-hmm. I feel like it is this like hidden epidemic that so many of us that we bear the wounds that we not necessarily have dealt with. I mean, I can think of, just from my research and reading, Sir Elton John, TED Talk educator, Danny Bostic. They both dealt with childhood trauma in different ways. Mm. And I remember just reading a recent statistic that 1 out of 8 children deal with childhood trauma, and that it manifests itself physically, mentally, but it shows up in adulthood. Can you speak to this, Eunice? What is going on? What is childhood trauma?
So I think you're right. I think that it's so prevalent and we don't talk about it. It's one of those things that because it stays silent, like it makes it happen more. And, that secrecy, like kind of protects it, so that it can keep flourishing. And so that's why I'm so glad that you're talking about it, to bring awareness to it. You mentioned that 1 in 8, did you say 1 in 8 people?
Yes, 1 in 8 children.
Yes, have experienced childhood trauma. And then I'm sure you're familiar with the ACE study. And if anyone out there is not familiar, it was a study done in the 1990s. And it basically showed that 1 out of 11 people have experienced some form of an adverse childhood event, ACE. So even if it's not trauma, it could be something that is potentially traumatic. And so we can go into that later about what all that means. But basically, yes, people have a lot of things that have happened in their childhood that if it's not dealt with, it really carries on into adulthood.
Okay. Now, can you define what is childhood trauma?
So trauma can be physical, it can be emotional. I wanted to quote Dr. Gabor Mate, and he is like an addiction specialist, but he's a psychologist, but he also, a lot of his work shows that people that later on in life have addictions have a root of some kind of traumatic event that happened to them. And he says that trauma can be something that happened to you that wasn't supposed to happen to you, or it can be something that you that didn't happen to you, like love and affection and being cared for, that was supposed to happen to you. So it's kind of a more broader term, but I think that that encompasses more of what people deal with. You know, it's not always physical or sexual abuse. It can be emotional neglect. It can be, you know, you didn't get your physical needs met, you know.
Okay, so you're saying it could be, right? Because whenever we think of trauma, childhood trauma, where I'm automatically thinking child sexual abuse.
Yeah.
But you're saying it could be abandonment, neglect.
Exactly. It can be a parent that was not emotionally attuned to their child, and so that their child's emotional needs didn't get met. That child was not validated. In fact, that child was taught to suppress their emotions and that it's not safe to express them. And so it carries on to this attachment style that will affect their adult relationships, whether it's romantic or in the workplace or with their friends. So,
Okay. Could it be a one-time traumatic event, like a car accident, like a loved one has died? Is that considered a childhood trauma, or is it more so spanning like many years?
yeah, I think it's both. I think it can be a like a one time event that was really traumatic, that really made an impression and an imprint on that person. It doesn't even have to be necessarily in childhood, but today, since we're talking about childhood trauma, yes, it can be a one-time event that happened in that child's life, like a fire, or someone in their family killed themselves or attempted suicide, or but it can also be something that repetitively happened. So it was something that they were constantly being told, or something that was constantly being done to them, something that they constantly witnessed, like if they witnessed domestic violence, and so that they were in an emotionally hostile environment. So Caroline Leaf, she says that basically the more that something happens to you, the more that something is said over you, it creates a stronger and stronger memory or an imprint. And so basically that becomes a part of that child's story or narrative. And it kind of like enmeshes into what they believe, like it's not safe, or I'm not loved, or I'm not worthy of love.
Wow. Okay. And so can we dive in a little bit deeper with the different types? You had mentioned abandonment, neglect, sexual abuse. Can we break down those different types?
Absolutely. So I'm referencing the ACE study that I talked about earlier. And so you're welcome to look it up for anybody that's interested in that to learn more about it. But there's different categories of things that have happened to you as a child that it is potentially traumatic, is the way that they define an adverse childhood event. So there's abuse of any kind, emotional, physical, or sexual. So that's the abuse category. Then there's a whole nother category of experiencing some kind of household problem. It could be domestic violence, like witnessing violence in the home, or like childhood violence, having a family member attempt or actually kill themselves, growing up in a house where there was substance abuse. So this is all an adverse childhood event that affects them later on. Having someone in the house with a mental illness actually contributes as it counts as an adverse childhood event, or someone being in jail in their house, in their family, a family member being in jail. And then there's a third category of neglect, which is an adverse childhood experience. And so we talked earlier about the emotional neglect, like you didn't feel loved, you didn't feel important or valued. And then there's physical neglect, where you didn't get food or you didn't get, safety. So basically your physical needs weren't met. And how this affects you is that years, like decades later, Jolly, it can put you at risk for health problems. So it can put you at risk for things like cancer and chronic illnesses like heart disease, stroke. It puts you definitely at risk for risky behaviors like sexual promiscuity and drug use. And then it shortens your lifespan overall.
Wow, how so? I mean, how does it shorten your lifespan? Why would trauma shorten my lifespan?
Yeah. So I think in two ways. So one is that there's a physical aspect to it. We know that when your body is in a state of stress, and what happens to people that are victims of trauma is that they store this stress, like they disassociate with it consciously and they store it subconsciously. And so that any kind of trigger or reminder of that event, it like sets off like this alarm response, right? And so they're always in this low grade stress state where your body is releasing like inflammatory chemicals, like cytokines and things like that. And we know that inflammation is actually like a root cause of chronic issues like obesity and diabetes and heart disease and even eventually cancer. And also I just wanted to say that, there's this, people talk about a genetic predisposition to having certain like physical ailments or even mental ailments. But I like to think about it like this. And Mark Hyman, he's a naturopathic doctor. He says that genes load the gun, but environment, like what happens to you, pulls the trigger. So you may have a genetic predisposition for something, but trauma can pull that trigger for you and set off sicknesses and ailments in your body.
So going back to, the childhood trauma, if as a kid, right, you are just experiencing, you're a kid, you don't know what is going on. You don't know that mom or dad has a mental disease. You don't realize you are being neglected or abandoned. You just know that something is off, right? So I think, is it safe to say that as kids, you're just feeling all these things and then you don't know where to go with it? You don't know who to talk to. You were just feeling and experiencing all these things, right? And then you're going through your teenage years, college years. I mean, and then how does it resurface in adulthood?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that, if you're not aware of yourself and like how, like what's happened to you and how you deal with things, like you can go a long time just thinking like, this is who I am. But I think that this is where self-awareness is so helpful, and like really having that time to reflect, like what happened in my childhood. Like everybody should know like what happened in your childhood. And that's a good place to start, is to write out things that you remember, especially when you see like, I'm not good at relationships. Like, why am I like this with people? Why am I guarded? That's a good sign that you need to do some digging. Right. And so your question was like, how do these problems in childhood resurface in adulthood? It goes back to those first few years of your life, which are so critical, right? Like it really shapes the social brain and the emotional brain, the limbic brain that we have. So your relationship with your primary caregiver really sets the tone for your relationships later on in life. And there's
I just want to ask, when you say those first few years are formative, are primitive, what's the age range we're talking about?
So the like 0 to 5 is like the critical years where your brain is like really developing socially. But then I will also add that because our brain is plastic or has the ability to change, like this whole idea of being neuroplastic, and this is the hopeful thing, is that just because something terrible happened to you doesn't mean that you're like, that's your fate and that's just, you're screwed for the rest of your life. Like that's not the way that God created us. He created us with that opportunity to transform our thinking and our thoughts. So there is that piece of it too.
Okay, I have trauma, but like, how does that, I often think like PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, that sounds like the trauma you're talking about. And that I automatically label as like military, right? That's who we think about when we think PTSD. And I always think, oh, that's for those folks over there. That's for those people in that neighborhood. But, not me, because I was raised pretty well, Yeah. So how will it manifest in my relationship as an adult, whether physically, whether relationally, mentally, emotionally, physically, how does it manifest? You already talked about it can cause disease, physical disease, but can you speak more so with the relational, mental, and emotional piece?
Yeah. So in the relational and mental aspects of it, I mentioned earlier about your relationship with your caregiver, and so there are different attachment styles, ways that we relate to people. And there's a lady named Tyus Gibson, who's an expert in this field of attachment styles. And she talks about, we each have a different attachment style, and it's based off of our relationship with, our parents or caregivers. And it's like we're playing a board game, but we have different rules. And so that's why we like miss each other, because we are relating to people differently. And so for example, if you had parents who were there for you and they met your physical needs, but they emotionally neglected you and they were not emotionally attuned to you, then this is called the dismissive avoidant attachment style. And so then this person that experiences as a child, they have a core wound of feeling defective, like something's wrong with me, I don't people don't want to connect with me, so there must be something wrong with me, or I've always been told to kind of suppress my emotions, so I'm not important. So they get these core wounds, and then this affects how they relate to other people, right? Because they're going to start viewing life through this lens of I'm not important and I'm not worthy of connection, and then they also struggle with a lot of shame. And so then there's a different attachment style that's fearful avoidant, or anxious avoidant. And this is the child that actually did have parents who were abusive, or just there was a lot of fighting in the house. And so it was like the parents were there, but the parents could be like, caring one moment, but then really violent the next moment. So it's very inconsistent. And so these people have problems with trust.
Okay.
right? Because of the inconsistency. And so then when in adult relationships, they're very scared to get close to people, and they have a hard time trusting people and committing. And then they're very like hyper vigilant. They study people and they're like, oh wait, you look, something's wrong, like I'm scared, like they're very scared to get close, and this is like a protective mechanism for them. And then there's basically 4 attachment styles: the dismissive avoidant, the fearful or anxious avoidant, the anxious preoccupied, which just very quickly, they're the people that their caregivers were warm and loving, but they were just too busy. They're very preoccupied, so they didn't have time for that child. And so that child has a core wound of being like left alone or abandoned. And so they also fear being excluded or disliked. And so they're very sensitive when they feel like someone's like leaving them out. And so in relationships, they can get offended really easily when they feel like you didn't include them, in something. And so for them, they need a lot of love and validation and open and extra communication. And then lastly, there's that secure attachment style where the parents really responded to the child's physical and emotional needs. And that child felt like it was safe to express their emotions. And they end up having healthy relationships with their romantic partner, their friends, or their colleagues at work. They feel like they're worthy of love, respect.
Is it, and how do I phrase this? It's really not based, and all this trauma is not based on what the parents think they gave, right? Because it's not, because as a parent, you might say, but I showed you love. I provided, put food on the table, went to work, bought clothes for you, whatever you wanted for school, I was there. It's not what other people say you experienced. It's it's your story. It's what you felt, right? You felt unloved. You felt unworthy. You felt no one cared about you growing up. Is that fair to say?
Yes, you hit the nail on the head. Yes. It's all in your perception of what happened. It's not maybe necessarily like what the parents thought they were doing, but it's in that child's perception of what was happening.
What would you categorize a latchkey kid? Because I feel like that's so many of us. We were latchkey kids growing up because our parents, came to this country, maybe worked 1 to 2 to 3 jobs, right? Does latchkey kids, is that kind of a form of neglect, abandonment? I don't know.
Well, and I think, yeah, that's a great question, because even for me as a working mom, like, I'm like, oh my gosh, am I being dismissive avoidant with my kids? Or, like, am I too busy? Am I raising up anxious, preoccupied kids because I'm so preoccupied, and I think that it's what message are you giving your children, when you are with them? Are you giving them the message of mommy and daddy don't have time for you? Or are you creating that sense of, what, yeah, I'm busy, but yeah, let's talk. You're important. I'm willing to be disrupted, and it's also just communicating with that child, like, mom and dad have to work to, provide you food, but here's what we have. We're going to, have these people in your life to support you while we're at work, or, if you're old enough, we're going to leave you at home. So just, I think, communicating with your child and making the most quality out of the time that you do have together. It's like, what does that child perceive?
That's why I think it's so important, right, Eunice? Where, I was just thinking about it this morning, the Bible verse that says, train up a child in the way that they should go. And when they are older, they will not depart from it. And the Holy Spirit said to me, I've often interpreted that verse to mean train them up in the way I want them to go, right? But the Bible specifically says train up a child in the way that they should go, meaning we all have a bent. God made us each unique specifically, and all individuals where we can't be divided, right? We are so unique, and we have unique characteristics, personalities, our temperaments. Everything is so unique. So we as parents, right, we cannot treat all 5 children, 3 children, however many kids we got, the same. We have to be essentially students of our children and how are they wired. Would you say that's true?
Yeah. Oh, yes. And yes, I think every parent can attest to what you're saying, is that every child is so unique and so different. And I remember after I had my first child, we are like, man, he is easy. We are good parents, like we got this parenting thing down. And then our second one came, we're like, what is this? Like, this is it's completely different, like it threw us a curveball. And then our third one's completely different too. And, there's this great book by Kathy Koch, and she's like a child psychologist, and she talks about the 8 great smarts. And so each person is smart in different areas. Like there's body smart, music smart, nature smart, art smart. So she names out like all of these 8. And I think that helps whenever you're relating to your children, like to know what they need and to appreciate what they have. So I think so I know you and I are both from the South Asian descent, and in our culture, we prioritize academics very much. And so I think if we're not careful and if we're not paying attention to the way that God individually designed our kids, we will say, you're not smart because you're not doing well academically. And I think that's where we really can speak into our children like these really crippling words that can affect them later on. And that becomes their narrative. That becomes what they believe, is like, I'm not smart. My parents don't love me because I'm not good enough in this,
I'm not making all A's, or
yes.
I think that's so true, because I think so many of us, especially our age, right, 30s, 40s, even 50s, we have this picture of what success is, right? Doctor, lawyer, engineer, kind of what was bestowed on us as kids. And we kind of are doing the same thing to our children. We want, and there's no blame, there's no shame. We're just saying what is, right? We want our kids to do well. We want them to to have a good job, earning good income. But I wonder if it's in the way of really training them in the way that they should go. What God was speaking to me, Eunice, today, it was crazy, because I was like, whoa, I've never seen that before, Lord. He said, when you train up a child in the way that they should go, they will not depart from it. So as adults, when we are departing from the things that we were trained up in, maybe it wasn't because we were trained in the way we were bent, right? That is why we leave professions. That is why we do certain things, because we were never trained in the way we were never fostered. Our gifts, our talents were never fostered in the way that created us to be. I mean, what do you say about that?
I think you're speaking some deep wisdom right there. And I think you're right. I think that parents are not asking those type of questions, like, what way should this child go? Because her calling is different than this child, and that can really like hinder the child later on, because they feel unfulfilled because they were trying to meet your expectations and they're going the way that you told them they should go. So you have children that grow up like unsatisfied, unfulfilled, feeling miserable, feeling like something is missing.
Wow, that's good. So I'm an adult now, right? Going back to childhood trauma. I've seen it affect my relationships, whether I can't keep a relationship, whether I'm constantly going in this crazy cycle in marriage. Physically, I have many medical problems, emotionally, mentally. What can I do, Eunice? How do I stop the crazy cycle? How do I get help after I've recognized, hey, that's me. I am one that's had childhood trauma. What do I do from here?
So the easy answer, I would say, is to get help, to talk to a trained counselor, especially someone who's trauma informed, and they will help you to identify, help you process what's happened in your childhood and help you reconceptualize that and, have a different view of what happened to you, and even be able to not have those type of like responses and fear, every time you get reminders of that. So that's number one, is seeking professional help. I think another thing that you can do on your own is to journal and to do reflection and to identify, earlier we were talking about core wounds, and asking, like, I think the greatest thing that you can ever ask is why, right? So whenever you journal and you write down, like, I had a hard day today and this person really made me angry, and then ask yourself why did that make you angry? And then as you keep asking why, it's going to really help you dig down deep into something that is a core belief that you have about yourself. And so you may not realize, like, I think I'm defective, but as you dig deeper and deeper, you're going to realize and identify some core beliefs that you have about yourself that you need to call out, and then you need to replace that with the truth about yourself. And so I think there's work that's done professionally, but I think there's work to also be done personally and individually. And just also having those healthy support people in your life, that can lovingly call you out and be like, hey, you're doing that thing again. I remember whenever I first got married, I was always on the defense with my husband, and it's because I, as a child, witnessed so many male figures in the Indian community treating their women, like their wives, poorly. And so I was like, not me. When I get married, I am not. But I didn't realize I was thinking that. And so my husband, like, we had to kind of talk through what I had witnessed, and seen as a child. And so once I was able to identify that, I could be like, okay, I'm going to dismantle that lie, and I'm going to replace it with truth that I am loved, and like, this is a safe place. And so, yes, I think it's about identifying and then confessing that and then replacing those things.
I love that. I love the two things that you said. Journaling, I think, is huge, because I've said before in the videos that writing is cathartic. And I love that you say you need to ask why. When you write things down, ask why. That is something that I love to do, is wait, let's get to the core of this thought. Yeah. Why do I feel like this? And, and God will, if you are open and honest and allow God to be with you while you write, he will reveal all of that stuff to you.
Yes.
So yes. I love that you mentioned, ask yourself why. Why do you feel what you feel? What are the beliefs, the core beliefs that you believe about yourself? So good.
There's a quote by an author, and he says that every sin that happens is because of a lie that we believe about God, and it's because we believe a lie about God, we believe a lie about ourselves, so if you believe that.
Yeah.
Yep. So if you believe that God is an angry God, you're going to always be ashamed, because you don't want to make him angry. And so you're not going to feel safe to talk to God, and you're going to feel, you're going to believe a lie about yourself, like God is angry with me. But the root of it is that you have believed a lie about God, and it goes back to the Garden of Eden where, Satan painted this picture about God, that God was trying to withhold something from Adam and Eve. And then therefore they believed that, wow, God is keeping something from us, and I guess we're not good enough. So yeah, we're just going to sin right now because it went back to what they believed about God, one of those things, like you said, you ask yourself why,
Yeah. When you talked about seeking help with childhood trauma, you said go seek professional help. Who am I seeking help from? Do I go to my family, my general practitioner? Am I seeking a psychiatrist, psychologist, just a licensed counselor? Who can I go to?
Yeah. So I like to think of primary care providers, like your general practitioner, as the gatekeepers. And once someone comes to us, then we like refer them out to get the help that they need. So I have patients that come in all the time with, actually they come up with a physical symptom, and then we realize like, okay, they need mental help, and then I refer them to a counselor. And so a psychiatrist is someone that is a medical doctor that's going to be able to diagnose and be able to put you on medications. And then a counselor is not going to be able to prescribe medications, but they're going to be able to help you, talk with you, talk through things, and help you identify core beliefs about yourself and how to replace that. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm a parent now. I'm just giving you a scenario, and my child has experienced some abuse from my hand, whether it was knowingly, unknowingly, whether it was, physical abuse, verbal abuse, abandonment, neglect, divorce, something my child has experienced. And I've just watched this episode. I've become more aware. What do I do for my child? What do I do to stop the craziness in my house? And how do I get my child help?
Okay, so I'm going to be honest and open with you here because being hard on my kids is something that I struggled with, especially with my first child. Like I would be really strict, and in the umbrella of being strict, I could easily be like, physically very hard when I discipline, or verbally I could say things. And this is something, if you realize that you are doing this, talk with your spouse, or someone you can trust, and be like, I don't trust myself, when I get angry. And my husband is like completely opposite of me. He's very calm and patient. And so I would literally call him when I'm angry with my kids and be like, help, like I'm about to smack this boy,
Yeah.
and he'd be like, okay, calm down, calm down. I just want you to hold him and just give him a hug. Okay. He needs to know that you love him and that you're for him right now. I don't know what you just said, but he just needs to know that. Okay. Now you go take a break. You go take a break, a mental break, and cool yourself down. And I think that's something practical that we can do is, if you realize that you have this tendency to act out in anger towards your kids, I think it's good to distance yourself and give yourself time to cool down, and then talk to your child when you're not angry, when you're able to talk to them in a calm and controlled way and tell them the reason why you're upset, or this is why you're going to get, this privilege taken away, or whatever, game time or whatever. And I think another thing to remember is to have grace on yourself, because I inflicted a lot of self-condemnation on myself. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible mom. I can't believe I did that, said that, whatever, thought that, whatever, and I think the way that God created us is just with so much grace in mind, like even the whole neuroplasticity, the way that our brains are able to change. Like, you have to know that if that's not a pattern that's happening every day, you're going to be okay. Your child's going to be okay. Your child is resilient, and it's the things that we do repetitively that becomes like a strong imprint on them. So if you can catch yourself before it becomes like a habitual pattern, like you can actually, like, it won't harm your child in a negative way, because I did that kind of stuff whenever my child was young. But as I grew up and got more mature in my faith, and like I grew the fruit of patience and self-control, like I can look at my child now, I'm like, wow, like we have a healthy relationship. I can tell that he has a good self-image, and I'm not nearly as angry and irritable and as I was. So
Praise God.
yeah.
No, I think that's awesome. And we are all works in progress. I think you hit it on the head when you said we need to have grace with ourselves, because the truth is we are not perfect. I tell my kids, especially my oldest, listen, mommy and daddy are gonna make a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
So much, but we are not perfect. And I will be the first to say, we make mistakes. We're going to get it wrong. We're going to do a lot of things right, but we're going to also do things wrong. And I think it's important,
Yes.
right, Eunice, to recognize when we do things wrong. Man, I did it wrong. I yelled. I spanked him. I got angry with him, inappropriately, and just admit it to our kids. Ask for forgiveness.
Admit it to them. Yes.
And not be afraid to ask for forgiveness,
Yep.
And I think that speaks volumes to them too, that, hey, mommy and daddy are not so prideful, really, that they can't ask for forgiveness.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I mean, this is so hard for us in the Asian culture, I think, to say sorry to your kids, but it's humbling, and it shows them that we're humans and that they're going to also mess up too, and it's okay, but this is how you deal with it. You confess your sin, and then you make it right, and then you do better next time.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, Eunice, it was such a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much. This was just really eye-opening for me as a parent on just picking up on the signs of trauma for myself, and also being more aware of, hey, how am I treating my kids? What am I doing, and then what I can do to stop the cycle, to be aware of it, and also to get help for myself and for my kids. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for doing this series. I think it's so important, and I pray that it helps so many people.
Amen. And before I let you go, Eunice, if we have some folks in the Oklahoma City area, you are a licensed, is it the
Nurse
mental health?
practitioner.
Yeah, licensed nurse practitioner, but also you are an integrative a medical provider, correct? So you specialize in mental health.
Yes. So the way that I like to explain it to people, because sometimes they're long names on the certification, it's like, what? So what do you do? So basically, like I fill the gaps of where the psychiatrist and the counselor and the therapist won't touch on. I'm not gonna do the psychiatry thing. I'm not gonna do the counseling or therapy thing. But I help to figure out other, like, the root causes of what could be going on. And if it is a traumatic event, like, I'm going to send you that way. But so many times mental issues there's an underlying cause of, like, a medical abnormality, a deficiency, a nutritional hormonal problem. So those are the things that I look at to kind of treat what's going on mentally.
Okay, great. And where can folks make an appointment with you? Where are you located?
Yeah, so they can make an appointment with me on my website. It's www.simonwellnessokc.com. And then, or you could call my number. It's 405-456-0101.
Now, I know you own your own practice and you recently just started a new location, right?
Yes, yes. So
Yay!
I'm located now in the Oklahoma City area, and I've expanded out to the Lawton area.
Praise God. I'm so happy for you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jelly.
You're welcome. Well, folks, if you enjoyed this episode, you found the information helpful, beneficial, please definitely like down below. Share this with someone that you think would benefit from it. Subscribe to the channel. And lastly, feel free to give to this ministry. We are not, I'm not getting paid by any means, but your donations would definitely help this ministry grow and touch the lives of so many women, to bring awareness to underlying issues that are going on in their lives so that they can break the chains and live free. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next episode.